Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is A Stranger in Goldenlode, Part 7, Episode 190. So we're getting up close to 200. And it's funny, when like a week or two ago when I was writing, I figured like this would be the week when the story would be wrapped up. But it turns out there's a little bit more to tell than I had planned on. So this does sometimes happen. We're not at the end of the story quite yet. But I do hope you find it interesting because there's plenty going on in this episode, and I hope you like it. Here we go. The next day, the pustules started to form on his skin. He did his best to stay healthy. He brought water and food next to his bed so he wouldn't have to get out of bed, and put his old chamber pot, which he never used unless the weather kept him out of the outhouse, by the bed as well. But there was little he could do. He bundled up, put wood on the stove every so often, and rested as best he could. 2 days in, Tom came to check on him. He was clearly afraid for his own health and didn't stay long, but did bring some clean water and a warm meal. Meanwhile, Sam, when not sleeping or in too much pain, thought about everything that had happened. And he realized one thing. Somehow, some way, Richard Dunning was at the back of it. The rats had come back. True, the amount of rats in a town might go up and down over time. One could argue that they were due for a boom in rats. But the first rat he had seen was the night Dunning came to town, and he had seen more rats since that day than since he had before he'd come to town. It wasn't coincidence. The rats had brought the disease with them, and Dunning must have brought the rats. How? And how did he get them all around the town? And it came to him. The wagon. He knew something about it was strange. Now he knew what it must be. He just hadn't known what to look for before. He wrote down his suspicions for Sheriff Tuggard. He put it in an envelope and closed it. He didn't put a name on the envelope. If he died in the night, he wanted it discovered by Sheriff Tuggard, and if he put the sheriff's name on it, he was afraid that Dunning might take it somehow. He could smell the pustules bursting under the covers. His fever was getting worse. Even waking, he was delirious now. His thoughts swirled of his wife, of Dunning, of Gabe, of Tom, of Daisy. Especially of Daisy. Part of him, a part he had not acknowledged since his wife's death, realized he was lonely. What would it be like to be with her? While the thought kept coming back, he realized that he was simply too old for her. And though he didn't begrudge anyone the way they made their living, he knew that her profession would make things complicated. Even in his dreams, he never thought of just paying her. He was in pain, and the breaking pustules stank. He was finding it difficult even to get out of bed to stoke the fire now. He ate and drank as best he could, but that too was very strenuous. He even lost track of time. It was hard for him to tell what day it was. A part of him realized he might well die. But he just didn't have it in him to give up. He kept the fire stoked. He kept drinking water and eating the simple food he could keep near his bed. The bed was filthy, but he had no way to get his sheets cleaned. One bright, cold morning, the fire had nearly gone out, and the chill had invaded his room before he struggled out of bed and stoked it. Daisy came. As soon as he saw the door open, he held up a hand and croaked, "Wait!" She stood there, framed with the bright daylight behind her. "I wanted to check on you, Sam," she said. She shut the door behind her. "No information?" he asked, though he didn't want to crawl out of bed to get her any money. "No," he said. "Stay by the door. I'm very sick," Sam said. She nodded. "You look it. Doc Sullivan is sick too, though." "Damn," Sam muttered. "How's Sheriff Tuggard? Also sick? His deputies, too." "How many people are sick in all of Goldenlode?" "No idea. Dozens at least. Scores, probably." "And I've got to get the information to someone. Maybe the bank." "What information?" In the envelope. He pointed at it on the table near his bed. She clearly didn't want to come in, and he couldn't blame her. He picked it up and spun it towards the door. She picked it up off the floor. Thank you. Perhaps the bank then, or if they would assign someone trustworthy to serve while the sheriff and his men are sick, please deliver it to them. Or maybe the mayor. They both knew the mayor was a figurehead. He had essentially been appointed by the bank and the mines and was good for nothing. She nodded. Will you need anything? I should be fine. I have water and food and wood for some more days. I don't want you or anyone to get what I have. Okay, Sam. She left. He went back to his pain and his delirium. By the end of the day, he could hardly remember the details. Several times he looked at his table, then panicked because the envelope was missing, only to remember that he had given it to Daisy. That night was the worst. He could hardly sleep from being semi-conscious all day, and his body ached just from lying down too much, let alone the pustules along his thighs and elsewhere. The fever was intense, and he could hardly reach over to occasionally get a drink of water. But the next morning, his fever broke. It did not go away immediately, but Sam could tell the worst was over. He was still very careful, but it felt good to be drinking and eating regularly and keeping the fire going. He even took a bit of extra water and a rag and cleaned himself before getting back in bed. The pustules hurt like crazy, but they too were getting better. Some were bruised almost black, but they were all less swollen, and no more of them burst. But he was afraid of a possible relapse, so he stayed in bed as much as possible and took care of himself. One more day, and then late the next morning, Daisy knocked on the door. She did so hesitantly, as though afraid she was knocking on the door of a dead man. But Sam's somewhat hearty "Hello" had her opening the door with a half-hopeful smile. "Sam," she said, "I'm glad you're feeling strong." She saw the one big pustule on his neck and winced. "It's okay, Daisy," Sam said. "I think I'm past the worst of it. I think I'll pull through." "That's great," Daisy said. "Listen, Sam," and she stepped inside to close the door. "The whole town is just turned upside down. I haven't been able to find anyone who's in charge. The mayor is sick, the sheriff's sick, the bank is closed, Parson Roscoe is sick too. So I decided to go to the Nugget and see Tom. He's okay so far," she said to Sam's change of expression. "And I know Dunning stays in Tom's room, so I was very careful." He opened the envelope and read it. Well, you should have seen his face. He was really angry. I think he would have thrown Dunning out right then and there, but something you wrote gave him pause. He called Johnny and Gabe, and they seemed to be in Tom's main room all the time now, watching for Dunning. But he still stays in his room. "Tell Tom not to make a move. Give me another day to get stronger. I think I can come to the Nugget tomorrow, the way things are going. I won't be 100%, but I'll be strong enough to come. He shouldn't try to go against Dunning without me." "Why?" "The man has a plan, and while we figured some of it out, I don't think we know it all yet. Dunning's dangerous, and you'll need me, both for what I can do and for the official license it'll give the situation. I'm not the law, but if anyone can stir up trouble and not get hanged for it, it's me. I don't want Tom, or Gabe, or Johnny for that matter, in the hoosegow." "Okay. I'll check on you again tonight and make sure you're still on the mend. And I'll let Tom know you say to sit tight." "That's right. Sit tight." His energy wasn't fully back, Sam could tell. Even this conversation was wearying. He took a moment to collect his thoughts, then continued. "We haven't confirmed yet that Dunning is doing it, but I'm telling you that the rats are behind the disease, and we need to make sure the word gets out right. It's not Tom's fault, but if the Nugget is seen as the cause, or the center, or anything like that, it could ruin Tom. So you may need to let people know to kill any rats they see, and put out traps if they got 'em. But don't bring the Nugget or Tom or even Dunning in on the conversation. Just say that the rats are bringing the disease. Let people know that much. Maybe we can stop this from getting worse. Okay. See you this evening then, Sam. Thanks, Daisy. She shut the door. Sam laid back on his bed. The conversation had taken some energy out of him, and he hoped he'd be strong enough to follow up on his promise the next day. And that's the end of the story for today. Obviously, still more to go. Presumably next episode will be the wrap-up, but we'll see. The way things are going, I don't know. But I hope you're enjoying it. And if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2021, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.